Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine 18 Tarot and Books. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. Welcome or welcome back. I am here with a Top Tarot Trumps installment, the tag started by Masha over at Musings by Masha. I'll link her below as always. This is card number 11, and I have chosen to feature Justice cards at number 11. Masha and I know many others are going to be featuring Strength cards right around now. I just happen to have more decks in my collection where Justice is 11, so that's what I went with. Now, I fully realize that I could have just shown either card in either position, regardless of what number any particular card had on it, but for some reason, I'm showing all number 11 Justice cards today. So I have 5 of them to share. They definitely have a theme. Okay, so the first Justice card that came to mind as a favorite, or rather the first one on my little pile of 5 here, all of which came to mind as favorites, is the Justice card from the Numinous Tarot by Cedar McLeod. I really like the composition of this card. I like the colors. I like the colors on the plain background. I like that this Justice figure has their scales on the sword hilt there, with the sun on one side and the moon on the other. I like that this card is symmetrical in a sense without being identical on each side. The guidebook that Cedar McLeod wrote for this deck talks about the importance of not mistaking justice or balance as neutrality or not taking sides or, maintaining status quos that are not in fact just. That justice is not treating everyone as though they're the same and coming from the same place. So it's a book that gets at the kind of equity, equality distinction in a pretty concise and comprehensible way, which I think is a great thing to see in a tarot guidebook. So this is one of my favorites. The next one that I chose is The Fifth Spirit Tarot by Charlie Claire Burgess. I really like this Justice card as well. I like that this Justice figure has the sword up and that they're moving. I really like the symbolism of the Justice figure moving, and particularly moving in contrast to this very rigid, unmoving, unchanging wall labeled House of Law in the background, which you can see in the corner there is crumbling. I feel like this really emphasizes the idea that justice is not justice is not enforcing laws. Well, period. Justice is definitely not enforcing laws impartially when those laws are not impartial and don't come from impartial places or contexts, right? And are not exerted as force in unequitable, disproportionate ways, and in this context, of course, this context being this is a deck that is, created in American context. Justice, as so-called justice system, is a settler colonial imposition, right? And so I like how overtly that this card depicts justice as not the house of law, and justice is as not law, right? Justice as potentially contrary even to law. Justice and the legal system not being the same thing. So that's one that I really like. A Justice card that I think is really important and powerful and effective is from Auntie Kay's deck, the Landback Tarot. And you can see here that the Justice title says Justice with a question mark after it. And that one little punctuation, I think, does a lot here in terms of demanding a critical interrogation of our concepts or understandings or internalized senses of what justice is, what justice feels like, what justice looks like, what constitutes justice and injustice. Just that question mark, I think, does that. But then here, you know, in the two sides of this scale of justice, on the one hand, we have a family, an Indigenous family, protesting and raising awareness here, holding the banner MMIP, which for folks who are not, you know, aware, stands for Missing and Murdered Indigenous People. And over here on the other side of the scales, we have the Canadian Parliament buildings. And you can see that there's a sniper trained on the backs of the family. And so I just want to read, also I just put it down. I'm saying this is like, this birch bark is one of my favorite deck backs of all time. And every time I see it, it makes me happy. So I'm just going to read the paragraph here from the guidebook, which is full of tabs. It says, justice. Who are the scales of quote unquote justice balanced and rigged for? Be aware of this in decision making and understanding situations. The scales of justice are built out of pipelines and held unbalanced by gold chains. Upon these unbalanced scales, a family brings attention to the missing and murdered Indigenous people in their family, from the man camps building the pipelines that are the scales of justice upon which the colonial state, shown as Canada's Parliament Hill, is held up to win. Just the same, a sniper's on hand, target ready. Fight against injustice. Protect your own, and do so in full awareness. And the reversed position, check for your complicity in oppression. And then it mentions the Libra Association. I think that this is vital to conversations about justice and conversations about the justice card. And what it can mean when the justice card comes up in a reading, right? I think that it cannot be balanced, you know, with the name justice on it. And I think that this is an important aspect of that. I also picked Justice from the Next World Tarot by Christy C. Rode. And this one has a picture of a protest on it. And so you can see it has a diverse group of people here demonstrating together with different kind of social justice related signs. And there's a megaphone there. And there's some costumes and props and a kiss-in and different. I get the sense of like diversity of tactics from this card, which I don't know that was like precisely the intent, but I'm sure it was part of it. And what I like about this is that justice isn't automatic. Justice is not the default, right? Justice is not the status quo. And when given that is the case, social justice is a movement, a series of movements, a series of interconnected, messy, complicated movements. Social justice is a verb and a doing and an action and a set of actions and a set of choices to act and not act in particular ways, and to use one's voice and to speak up. And it's not a system. It can't be one, I don't think. And so I like that here justice is messy. Justice is complicated, and it's a thing that's being figured out in the doing of the work is how I see this justice. And so this card then I think asks how one is or could be showing up to that work, right? And I think that's a relevant thing for me in a lot of readings that I'm doing, whether for myself or for others. So I like cards that ask, these kinds of questions. Finally, the only completely renamed one that I chose and I largely chose it for the rename. That is the intersection card from the Slow Holler Tarot. And I like bringing in intersection and the idea of intersectionality to a justice card in this kind of overt of a way. Intersectionality being a term that was conceptualized and defined by Kimberly Crenshaw, a Black feminist legal scholar, but which speaks to a way of thinking that certainly goes back, much further back than Kimberly Crenshaw's writing, first writing on this in kind of the 1990s, that has to do with conceptualizing systems of oppression, systemic and structural racism, patriarchy, and so on, colonialism, capitalism, as operating not parallel to each other, but in interconnected ways, and therefore as inextricable from each other when we're trying to understand these things, right? You can't understand one system of oppression as though it is operating in isolation from others. Sometimes intersectionality is talked about as, people have different aspects to their identity, and all of those aspects can't be separated from the whole person. And that misses something important in terms of, intersectionality as a body of activist theoretical work that has to do with understanding systems of oppression so that they can be actively, and effectively combated and dismantled, right? It's not just a conceptual tool for understanding how identity works, right? It's fundamentally about understanding how power works. And how power works, I think, is a vital question for the justice card, right? How power is working in a given situation, how power is being exerted in a given situation, what kind of power relations are being perpetuated or being questioned, or should be perpetuated, or should be, questioned, should be dismantled, should be reconfigured. These are all justice card questions, right? And I think that this, in some ways, this is a really different framing of justice than maybe, the justice card that is more focused on that kind of house of law kind of imagery, right? Because, just thinking about Kimberly Crenshaw's work on intersectionality as a really well-known example, she looks at and analyzes how anti-discrimination law, by the very way that it is structured and how it is litigated and how it is understood, disadvantages or is unable to account for the particular kinds of oppressions experienced by multiply marginalized people, right? And that needs to be part of a justice card conversation too, right? And these things for me and the readings that I do are things that come up, right? And so I really like, these justice cards, like the Numinous Tarot, like the Fifth Spirit Tarot, like the Landback Tarot, and the Next World Tarot, and the Slow Holler Tarot, that ask really important questions about justice and how we can understand justice and how we must challenge ways that we have been taught to see justice, how we think about what a just world would look like, and how we think about getting there, right? And how we think about engaging in those kinds of struggle. And these are justice cards that inspire that kind of thinking for me, and that demand that I do that work. And so that's why these are some of my favorite justice cards. I look forward to seeing everybody else's favorite strength cards and the the subsequent cards as we go on in the top tarot trumps. Thanks again always to Masha, and thank you for watching. If you have any favorite Justice cards, let me know in the comments. I would love to know about them. I will see you all again soon.